Welcome DHARMA Initiative recruits. This is the introductory film for the classified research project to which you have been assigned. Designated Project Antichrist, this station does not investigate supernatural forces, eschatological traditions, or theological claims. Its purpose is far more practical. Over several decades, initiative researchers have identified repeating patterns in human communities, patterns in which destructive tendencies, once dispersed and relatively harmless, begin to concentrate. As these pressures accumulate, they reshape social, political, and economic structures, eventually giving rise to the idea of a singular oppositional figure. This figure is not a supernatural entity, but a cultural projection formed when life-sustaining principles deteriorate and are replaced by coercion, deception, and the consolidation of authority. Your assignment is to study these conditions at each developmental stage, using a population confined to our terrestrial island with no opportunity for escape. Through systematic observation and controlled analysis, you will examine how destabilizing forces emerge, how they circulate through groups, and how they solidify into a shared narrative of adversarial identity, or others. To assist you in this process, the initiative has developed a triadic analytical model. This model will allow you to trace the sequential development of destructive dynamics, identify the inflection points at which they accelerate, and apply countermeasures before they crystallize into full systemic failure. Please pay careful attention. The material you are about to encounter is essential for preventing environments in which these distortions take root. In the first stage, the destructive principle works quietly alongside the healthy one. It does not yet dominate, it simply cohabits the same psychic and social space, testing boundaries and learning how to insinuate itself. Systems begin showing slight inconsistencies, truths that are selectively applied, justifications that wobble under scrutiny, and institutions that tolerate mutually contradictory values. Meanwhile, human imagination begins forming the earliest outline of an adversarial personality, a projection created not by fear but by the mind's instinct to make sense of conflicting forces. This is a classic example of a coexistence triad, where each element has a direct and reciprocal effect on every other element. The negation of one implies the negation of the others. At this stage, nothing appears overtly catastrophic, yet the groundwork is laid for future escalation because the principle of negation has become normalized through coexistence. In the second stage, the destructive principle begins to feed on small distortions that have taken root within human systems. Each slight compromise in truth or integrity generates larger organizational inconsistencies, and these create fertile ground for deeper forms of corruption. People start noticing patterns that feel orchestrated, not because a single adversary exists, but because the system's failures now appear coordinated. The environment becomes self-amplifying. Corruption strengthens institutions that benefit from it, and weakened institutions encourage further deviation. This represents a reinforcement triad, in which each element pushes the next forward, forming a cyclical escalation. Principle drives system corruption. System corruption sharpens the imagined adversary, and the adversary myth feeds back into the principle's spread. Once this loop begins, the triad accelerates, subtly preparing the population for more severe forms of structural distortion. In the third stage, the destructive principle operates not merely as influence but as cause. The negation of the Christic principle triggers structural consequences that ripple outward: failing institutions, unstable markets, fear-driven politics, and moral disorientation. As these systemic failures accumulate, people instinctively seek an explanation proportional to the scale of the collapse. They begin imagining a singular figure who must be orchestrating the decay, because the alternative, that their entire environment is unraveling due to dispersed causes, is too complex to grasp emotionally or intellectually. This demonstrates a causal triad, where one element initiates a chain reaction leading to the next, culminating in a perceived unified focal point. The myth of a singular adversary is not the beginning, but the end of the causal chain, a narrative produced by the need to assign agency where systems have failed. In the fourth stage, the public imagination first solidifies around a figure who seems to defy the ordinary limits of human capability. The archetype appears either as a miraculous success story, someone who rises impossibly fast, achieves results that seem beyond logic, or deploys innovations that feel indistinguishable from magic, or as a harbinger of devastation whose actions produce consequences so dramatic that they seem supernatural. The principle being rejected is discernment, the steady discipline of grounding truth in coherence rather than spectacle. As systems deteriorate, technologies are repurposed as spectacles rather than tools. Governance relies on shock and awe, social platforms overwhelm critical reasoning, and economies lean on illusion and artificial scarcity. Society becomes primed to interpret extraordinary outcomes as the work of an extraordinary being. This configuration exemplifies a non-linear triad, where small shifts in principle generate outsized system effects, and those system effects give rise to the archetype. The imagined miracle worker is not born from magic, but from an environment where spectacle has eclipsed understanding. Populations become increasingly convinced that their circumstances are driven by an intelligent, centralized force, when in reality they are witnessing runaway feedback loops within destabilized systems. In the fifth stage, the destructive principle begins consuming fragments of the very structures and values that once opposed it. Systems start to reward behaviors that resemble integrity while quietly reinterpreting them. Virtues are co-opted as instruments of control, and moral language becomes detached from moral substance. With spectacle now normalized, the emergent archetype evolves into the figure of the consummate deceiver, the one who charms, persuades, seduces, and manipulates with effortless authority. The negated principle here is integrity, grounded in truthfulness and transparency. In its absence, systems grow accustomed to narrative control as a primary instrument of governance. Information ecosystems become fields of manipulation. Political and corporate institutions treat truth as expendable. Incentives reward whoever can tell the most compelling or convenient story. And entire economic sectors develop strategies where fraud is indistinguishable from innovation. In this context, the deceiver archetype forms naturally, absorbing traits from both the corrupted principle and the distorted system. This is the signature of an inclusive triad, where the adversarial image incorporates and reorganizes fragments of the very norms and institutions it corrupts. Populations expect a master liar because their environment behaves as though deception were its animating logic. The system has begun to use its own moral vocabulary as camouflage for negation. In the sixth stage, the adversarial image crystallizes as the figure who promises unity, stability, or harmony while quietly concealing mechanisms of coercion. The public begins to imagine a leader, or an enemy, whose defining trait is the delivery of peace purchased at the expense of justice. Here, the negation at work is the replacement of authentic reconciliation with superficial harmony, the kind achieved by silencing dissent rather than resolving conflict. Systems respond accordingly. Political structures enforce order through surveillance, economies grow by masking exploitation, and public relations campaigns maintain calm by suppressing truth. This is the hallmark of a conjoined triad, in which the emergent fear image and the compromise system feed one another, and both are animated by a corrupted principle. The false peace archetype gives the entire constellation its shape, persuading populations that calm without conscience is desirable, and creating the illusion that stability, no matter how brittle, is evidence of benevolent leadership rather than a precursor to collapse. The seventh stage ushers in the archetype of the all-encompassing ruler, the imagined architect of a world unified not by cooperation, but by the erasure of difference. The principle being overturned here is pluralism itself, the richness of local autonomy, cultural diversity, and distributed power. In its place arises the temptation of global uniformity, expressed through economic harmonization, corporate empires that float above national law, and transnational institutions that dilute democratic consent. As these forces expand, the fear image of the world sovereign becomes increasingly coherent, because the system's scale and ambitions appear to mirror the imagination's tyrant. This constellation is a harmonic triad, a synchronized resonance in which the principle of homogenization, the overscaled institutions, and the archetype of global dominion all reinforce one another. Each makes the other seem inevitable, and the world finds itself seduced by the promise of a unified order even as it senses the cost, the disappearance of the local, the small, the human. The triad's components do not merely coexist or reinforce one another, they vibrate in alignment, making the destructive influence feel comprehensive and unified. This perceived harmony makes the triad exceptionally resilient, because even attempts to counter one element are absorbed and reinterpreted by the others. In the 8th stage, the adversary is envisioned as the enforcer of economic submission, one whose power hinges on the ability to determine who may participate in society's material life. The negation at stake is the corruption of freedom of conscience, replaced by financial systems that punish moral integrity and reward ideological conformity. When markets become tools of social scoring, debanking, or digital restriction, people naturally imagine a single figure orchestrating it all. The system's drift toward coercive economics converges perfectly with the archetype of the one who controls buying and selling, because the system behaves as if it had been designed by one for his own interest. This is a convergent triad, in which principle, structure, and fear image narrow toward a single point of meaning. The more coercive the economy becomes, the more people believe in the adversary who wields that coercion. The myth emerges not from fantasy, but from the tightening vice of systems that confuse survival with obedience. Convergence compresses meaning and possibility, giving the destructive principle the appearance of inevitability and the illusion of unity. In the 9th stage, the fear image becomes the idolater of himself, the one who proclaims divinity, who elevates his own authority above all limits. The principle being negated is humility, the acknowledgement that human authority must remain bounded, accountable, and subordinate to transcendent truth. In its place arise cults of personality, ideological systems that demand reverence, and corporate or political brands treated as sacred objects. Institutions begin rewarding self-mythologizing figures who embody the system's inflated sense of itself, and the imagined adversary becomes the exaggerated personification of this trend. This dynamic forms a combination triad, where different pairs, hubris and system and image and hubris, continually feed or contradict each other, producing oscillations in public perception. The adversary seems both omnipresent and absurd, both powerful and hollow, because the forces that create him are themselves unstable. Yet the archetype persists because societies wrestling with institutional narcissism naturally imagine a figure who demands the worship the system already craves. These unstable combinations heighten the sense of crisis because they prevent the population from forming a consistent understanding of what is happening, making the myth of an intelligent adversary feel more plausible as events become harder to interpret. In the 10th stage, the adversarial image is that of the persecutor, the one who hunts, suppresses, or marginalizes those who hold to conscience. The negated principle here is the freedom to dissent, the right to moral resistance, and the protection of minority truths. Systems at this stage begin penalizing ethical non-compliance, framing principled objection as pathology, and constructing public-private mechanisms that punish refusal to conform. As this dynamic intensifies, society instinctively imagines a tyrant directing the campaign, even when the persecution arises diffusely across institutional layers. This formation exemplifies an association triad, wherein the corrupted principle and the system's coercive behavior become tightly entwined, and the imagined adversary becomes the narrative face of that entanglement. Every policy that marginalizes conscience feels like the signature of this figure, and every invocation of him reinforces compliance by making resistance seem dangerous. The triad solidifies through association, not through proof. This interplay creates a cultural environment where negation becomes the dominant interpretive framework. In the 11th and final stage, the archetype of the lawless one reaches its mature and catastrophic form. By this point, the imagined figure is no longer simply a symbol of disorder or a projection of cultural fear. Instead, the archetype fuses with the governing order itself. Whether embodied in a leader exalted beyond accountability or invoked as an existential enemy whose threat justifies limitless control, the result is the same. The figure and the state become indistinguishable. The principle being negated is right order, moral coherence, restraint, the alignment of freedom with the good. In its place emerges a regime in which laws contradict ethical truth, institutions punish virtue, economies flourish through destabilization, and cultural norms invert long-standing moral foundations. The system no longer merely tolerates lawlessness, it is reorganized around it. This is the defining mark of an integration triad, in which all three components, principle, system, and archetype, collapse into one another. The fear image of the lawless one is no longer outside the structure, threatening it from some imagined throne. Instead, The structure itself behaves like the archetype, chaotic when chaos serves its ends, rigid when rigidity consolidates power, arbitrary when arbitrariness maintains submission. Citizens may still speak of the tyrant or the enemy, but these narratives now serve the system's goals, providing both a justification for totalitarian measures and a myth that binds the population to its logic. Historically, this is the point at which atrocity becomes possible on a mass scale, because the ideological figure, whether revered or feared, authorizes the state to transcend the limits that once protected human dignity. The culmination of the Antichrist Project is therefore not the rise of a singular villain but the fusion of negated principle, distorted institutions, and mythic persona into a total environment. The archetype that began as a warning becomes the mask through which the system enforces its will. Lawlessness does not merely reign, it is codified, ritualized, and administratively enacted. This final stage reveals why the preceding ones must be understood clearly. Once integration is reached, resistance must confront not a person, but an entire reality built in that person's image. You have now reviewed the complete sequence of triadic developmental stages associated with the formation of adversarial structures within human systems. As demonstrated, these patterns do not require a singular architect or intentional force. They arise through cumulative distortions, subtle at first, then increasingly rapid, until the environment itself becomes indistinguishable from the logic of negation it once resisted. Your assignment within this program is to track that progression with precision. By understanding each developmental phase, initiative researchers can design systems capable of resisting or redirecting these influences before they reach irreversible thresholds. Please respect the sacrifice of the island's inhabitants and do not interfere with their natural progression. It is understood that full integration becomes inevitable once this destabilization reaches the harmonic triad, and only system collapse can reset the environment to a stable baseline. Please adhere to the non-interference protocols precisely to preserve the integrity of our research and ensure that system reset occurs on schedule. Small deviations, when compounded over time, can produce outcomes far beyond the scope of the original distortion. Thank you for your attention, and for your continued service to the DHARMA Initiative. What you have learned is essential for maintaining the stability of both our research environment and the communities we seek to protect. Namaste, and good luck.